didn't see any sign of love.
Something evil was not right. Felt like a darkness.
To murder more people in a populated area.
The heinous nature of this crime.
I wish I could take it back, but reality is that we can't.
Hi, glad to see you back on my channel. Teenage years are never easy. You're searching for an identity and battling all sorts of emotions, all while trying to prove you're independent to your family, but also convince them to give you money. Well, that's the story of an easy teenage life. Some are much, much worse. And in some cases, it's worse for the family, not the teen. In 2013, Nehemiah Griejo was living with his mom, dad, and 3 younger siblings. But something was not right. Something had been brewing in Nehemiah's mind for years, and he couldn't hide it anymore. One day, he decided he was going to steal his father's gun and kill his entire family. Then, he was going to continue his murder spree in the city. But not everything went according to his horrible plan. Watch on to see what this psychotic teen ended up doing and why. But I must warn you, it's about to get pretty nasty. Our story begins in South Valley, New Mexico. It's a place full of natural beauty and rich multicultural traditions, but also a town with a worrying poverty rate, with about a quarter of South Valley families struggling financially. Nehemiah Griejo was born on March 20th, 1997 to parents Greg and Sarah. He was Sarah's first child, but that wasn't the same case for Greg. He had 5 or 6 children from his previous marriage, and he was about to have 3 more after Nehemiah. And this was not the only interesting bit of history that Greg brought to his family. He was an Army veteran who was from gangster life and then transformed into a devout, almost too devout Christian. When I say almost too devout, I mean that Greg now didn't see any other way to live, and he imposed this on his family as well. During prison, he had become a jail minister at the Bernalillo County Metropolitan Detention Center. He enjoyed this position for 13 years, helping to rehabilitate ex-convicts and helping them to reintegrate into society. The Albuquerque Rescue Mission described Greg as kind of a big guy. He had kind of an intimidating appearance at first glance. He had some rough edges, but once you got to know him, he was a very kind man. He always had a really quick smile. Greg had done a great job as a jail minister, but it was time to be free again. For him, there were only 2 options: go back to a life of crime or become an active member of the Christian community. Crime was no longer an option. Not only was it dangerous and an illegal life, but Greg associated this with extreme poverty he'd grown up in. His mother, brother, and 2 sisters often went for days without having a proper meal. And like in many cases, this pushed him to theft, petty crime, and gangs. Greg wanted to put all of that behind him and to provide a good model for his current family with Sarah. He became a minister at Calvary Chapel. He was also chaplain for the fire department and a counselor for troubled youth at the Metropolitan Detention Center. But at home, he ruled with an iron fist and had very traditional family views. He liked his daughters to have long hair because he thought it looked pretty, and he liked his sons to be tough. He also didn't allow his children to date until they were adults. However, he did impose that they work within the local church community at a very young age. All 4 of his children worked for the Calvary Chapel in Albuquerque. But Greg didn't necessarily value Christianity for its peaceful side. He kept several guns in the house, adamant that the family should always be ready in case of a burglary. And he used this potential threat as an excuse to teach his children to use guns too. The Griejo home was more like an army than a family, and one of their neighbors noticed this.
I think he was a tyrant, and the kids under that type pressure, I didn't see any sign of love among those people.
Indeed, it's probably not very pleasant to grow up with a very authoritative dad, but Nehemiah wasn't showing any signs of sadness or aggression. To everyone who knew him, Nehemiah was a happy, friendly boy with decent grades and good relationships at school. He was also a talented musician. By his early teens, he was already playing guitar, bass, and drums within the church choir. As for channeling his energy, he competed in several wrestling tournaments. Perhaps unsurprisingly, he wanted to go into the military as a career. He was deeply inspired by his father's figure and would often dress up in his old military suit. You might think Nehemiah developed into a gloomy loner as he grew up. That's what most troubled kids do, right? Well, he didn't. He was still very active in the church community. He would play basketball and make lots of friends there, and he would even go down to Mexico with his father whenever he would visit his extended family. Sarah, Nehemiah's mom, was a homeschool teacher who loved history, animals, and being a part of the church community. While she wasn't known to rule with an iron fist like Greg, she adhered to strict house rules and would often tell her children off if she thought they were misbehaving. In January 2013, Nehemiah was 15 years old. He wanted more independence, but he didn't seem to get it. His parents were still very strict. Around this time, he had a 12-year-old girlfriend. Needless to say, she was a secret from the family, but this bothered him a lot. As days passed, Nehemiah started hating his mother. Every day, a little more. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew what he wanted to do. In the very late hours of January 19th, Nehemiah unlocked the gun closet and picked up his father's .22 caliber rifle. He went into his parents' bedroom. Only his mother, Sarah, was there, sleeping, as Greg was working night shifts at the time. Nehemiah walked right up to his sleeping mom and hit her in the head. Apparently, he was frustrated with his mother after a fight they'd had last night. At around 1 a.m., Nehemiah took a picture of his mother and sent it to his girlfriend. Meanwhile, the sound had woken up Nehemiah's 9-year-old brother, Zephaniah. So he came into the parents' bedroom and asked Nehemiah what was going on. Nehemiah calmly told his brother that he had just ended Sarah's life. Zephaniah didn't believe him, so Nehemiah lifted his mother's head as proof. This is the stuff of nightmares for anyone, let alone her 9-year-old son. He started having a fit and rushed to his mother's head to try and stop the bleeding. But Nehemiah didn't want anything to do with this. He told Zephaniah he was next, and him in the head as well. Then he went over to his little sister's bedroom. They were cuddling and crying. They knew something was very wrong. But this sight didn't move Nehemiah. He lifted the gun and did the same to 5-year-old Yael and 2-year-old Angelina. His whole family, bar Greg, was lying in a pool of. Nehemiah tried to sleep, but he couldn't.
Can't sleep, I had a hard time sleeping. So what'd you do when you were in your sister's room? You know, I completely turned off my conscience. I really did. You know, I just let the beats come out.
But the night was far from over for Nehemiah. He switched weapons, this time taking his father's AR-15 semi-automatic, and quietly waited for his dad to come home in the small bathroom downstairs. Around sunrise, Greg came home from an overnight shift at the Albuquerque Rescue Mission, the homeless shelter he'd been working at. First, Nehemiah waited for Greg to walk around the house. He wanted his father to realize what had happened before he annihilated him too.
Fired 4 or 5 times. Fire again after he was on the ground.
Not only had Nehemiah gunned down his entire family, he made sure each and every one of them was aimed at the face. A most gruesome act, unthinkable for anyone who knew the 15-year-old. But even now, the day was not over for Nehemiah. He had big plans. He wanted to end his girlfriend's family, then go to a Walmart and open fire there before dying in a police shootout.
Investigators believe the boy wasn't done yet, saying he reloaded the AR-15 and the .22 caliber rifle and put them with more ammo into the family minivan. Investigators say he wanted to come to this Walmart. Why? According to the criminal complaint, to murder more people in a populated area and then die in a with police.
Nehemiah put his rifle in the family van and drove over to Calvary Chapel, where everyone expected the Griejo family to turn up soon. After all, they were devout members of the community. There, Nehemiah met his girlfriend. They hung out in the church's skate park, basketball courts, and local bookstore for a few hours. Apparently, Nehemiah told his girlfriend to tell people that his whole family died in a car accident. Obviously, she knew this wasn't true. Just that night, he had sent her a picture of Sarah's body. Over the next few hours, Nehemiah also spoke to his girlfriend's grandmother and to a church security guard. But his story wasn't straight. He told everyone he had lost his family, but he kept changing the story. In one case, he said someone had broken into his home and killed his family. Did he think people would just say, "Oh, okay," and carry on with their day? Later that afternoon, Pastor Justin Marbury knew something was off before even speaking to Nehemiah. There were no signs of the Griejos, and he heard that Nehemiah was acting odd.
Part of what I do as a pastor is I'm watching out for the church, for the people here, and part of that is paying attention.
Do you think paying attention made a difference here?
I think taking it seriously and following through did.
The pastor met with Nehemiah and asked him what had really happened to his family. Nehemiah didn't have a story anymore. He just said that they were dead. When pressed for details, Nehemiah said he just went home and discovered his family had died. However, he couldn't explain to the pastor why he didn't call 911. That's what you do in such a case, right? Pastor Justin thus notified the police officer Vince Harrison, who ironically was just leading a drill on what to do if a shooter goes loose inside a church. As soon as Vince saw Nehemiah, he knew he was guilty.
Just his behavior was real quiet and cold and a matter of fact. And the red flags started going up.
The once bubbly boy with lots of friends and talents was now cold, quiet, and was staring into the ground. Justin and Vince took Nehemiah in the police car and drove straight to his house to check if what he was saying was true. When they arrived, Vince told Nehemiah to stay in the car. The men would go to check the house on their own. What they saw would scar them for life.
Thinking about it, does it send chills up my spine? I'm not sure if he came here for help. This is what he knew. This was his life away from his home.
Through an incredible stroke of luck, if you can call it that, Nehemiah's decision to stop at the church before continuing his murder spree meant the pastor and officer could stop it. Perhaps the church was a comfort zone for a very distraught Nehemiah, or perhaps it was just a meeting point with his girlfriend before the horror show started. Or maybe it was a cry for help. According to criminal psychologists, there are three main types of teenagers who kill their parents: the severely abused, the mentally ill, and the dangerously antisocial. The latter see their parents as an obstacle to their goals. Whether Nehemiah saw his parents as obstacles to his relationship or more general obstacles is unclear. He did grow up in a house with very strict rules. Perhaps his rage came from his desire to be more independent. When he was arrested, Nehemiah Griejo's first story was that he had been at a friend's house overnight, and he had only returned early in the morning to find his family dead. But the detective was clear. They saw the wounds, and they traced it to all his guns. That's when Nehemiah admitted it was all his doing. But he did so without showing any signs of guilt or distress. He added that he'd had thoughts for months too. The police officers talked to Nehemiah about his whole life prior to the incident. They wanted to paint a better picture of his character. Apparently, Nehemiah was cold and expressionless throughout the whole interrogation, with one exception. Every time he would speak about his video games, his face would light up. Around 2012, Nehemiah had developed a passion for violent video games. The more he played, the more he retreated from his friends, music, or basketball. The games were often the source of his conflicts with Sarah, hence Nehemiah's growing anger. Nehemiah Griejo was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of child resulting in death. Perhaps shockingly, the shards of the Griejo family supported Nehemiah fiercely throughout his trial. These are Greg's older children and siblings. Greg's brother Eric was a former Democratic senator. He spoke about Nehemiah. It's clear to those of us who know and love him that something went terribly wrong. Whether it was a mental breakdown or some deeper, undiagnosed psychological issue, we can't be sure yet. What we do know is that none of us, even in our wildest nightmare, could have imagined he could do something like this. Nehemiah's older sister Annette and his aunt Regina also spoke out for him, trying to picture him as an angry, confused kid, rather than a cold and calculated killer. But this picture didn't really stand. It's clear something clicked inside Nehemiah's head, but his mass was not a spontaneous incident. He had spent months planning it, and his original plan was even darker. He wanted to kill dozens more people before dying in a shootout. Furthermore, there was evidence for this. For about a week prior to the murder, Nehemiah kept making very dark comments to his friends. He told them about wanting to kill people inside of a Walmart, about ending his family, but as it happens in many similar cases, no one batted an eyelid. Very rarely do teenagers take such remarks seriously. Nehemiah's friends must have thought he was bluffing or venting. However, Nehemiah's family were keen on helping him through the trial. They found a way to twist the events against the police. When he was arrested, Nehemiah agreed to speak with the investigators without an attorney or an adult present. The interview lasted 90 minutes, during which Nehemiah told the police about his love of video games, including Modern Warfare and Grand Theft Auto. He also told the police about his big mass annihilation plan. His uncle Eric Griejo then criticized the police for letting Nehemiah give a statement without counseling from an adult. But the prosecution presented Nehemiah's confession as evidence that he had planned to go on a murder spree after ending his family's lives. Needless to say, that earned him an even higher charge. Eric fought back, saying that if any of Nehemiah's family members would have been inside the interview room with him, they would have helped him formulate his answers better. What was Eric playing at? His 15-year-old nephew had just butchered his whole family, including his only brother. Why was he working so hard to defend him? Was he keen on offering Nehemiah a second chance, or was it a political stunt? The Griejo family didn't want Nehemiah tried as an adult. Their pleas worked, and Nehemiah was initially tried as a juvenile. This meant he would get less time and treatment for rehabilitation. Indeed, a children's court judge initially found him to be amenable to treatment. Nehemiah pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of intentional child resulting in death. While this wasn't small potatoes, it did mean that Nehemiah would walk free in a few years' time. But in March 2018, as Nehemiah was getting close to his 21st birthday, there were more and more discussions about his release. Well, against his release. It seemed a bit too soon to release someone who had murdered his entire family. The legal experts did not agree that any teen should get a lighter sentence just because he's a teen.
There are lots of arguments here that teens aren't fully developed and can't be held accountable for their crimes. What do you say?
Yes, that is true. That does not apply in this case. This is somebody that's going to act in an outrageous way again. There's no doubt in my mind.
The legal experts went on to criticize the law for making it so easy for dangerous teens to leave prison on their 21st birthday. It's simply not the same case for every underage person. Dr. Drew suggested holding the judge and defense attorneys accountable in case Nehemiah goes out and again. This was obviously a joke, but it did have an effect on the Attorney General's office. Soon enough, the office appealed the decision to let Nehemiah go free. Just 11 days before he was set to be released, the New Mexico Court of Appeals ordered the judge to hold another hearing and take into account the horrifying nature of the teen's crimes.
This is what the Attorney General is doing on this appeal. The focus, the heinous nature of this crime, the fact 2 adults, 3 children dead, the fact that it was premeditated, the fact that not only are 5 people dead, he was planning a mass shooting.
In 2018, Nehemiah Griejo was finally tried as an adult. He was given 3 life sentences and an additional 7 for ending the lives of both his parents. It will be another 30 years before he is eligible for parole. In court, he addressed his older sisters.
I am sorry for taking our parents and our sins. I wish I could take it back, but reality is that we can't. I want no retaliation. I love you guys, and I want to see the best for y'all. And whatever you may do, and I do pray for you guys to have healing the way I'm having healing.
Nehemiah spoke like a person on the way to recovery, and again, the Griejo family supported him by pointing out exactly this. They said he was clearly open to changing his ideas and behavior. Nehemiah's Aunt Regina particularly speaks up for mental health and for seeing Nehemiah as a person whose mental health has been improving over the last few years. Indeed, Nehemiah Griejo was diagnosed with psychosis and dissociative disorders and has started taking medication. Regina has been with him every step of his treatment. Regina lobbies for Nehemiah to get treatment in a professional mental health care facility, not prison, as she believes that there is hope for her nephew. She doesn't want him to spend the rest of his life in jail. She advises all parents to look out for their children's mental health and to spot and address any problems before they generate a full-blown crisis. This could happen to you. I would advise parents to get smart on mental health. We're doing it now, after the crisis. Do it before the crisis. Perhaps Regina is right. Nehemiah might just be a tragic case, the result of tough parenting, violent video games, and guns in the house. Perhaps the Griejo family could have avoided the massacre if they knew what was going on inside Nehemiah's mind. Or maybe it's just a truly tragic and upsetting case, where a once promising boy became an angry beast and chose a point of no return. Hey, thanks for watching. Before you go, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as there's always more where this came from. Till next time, and stay safe.